Have you ever spent 3 hours crafting the perfect email only to never send it? Or maybe you've rewritten the same paragraph 20 times, convinced it's still not quite right. Welcome to the perfectionist's paradox, where the pursuit of flawless becomes the enemy of done. Today we're diving deep into why your obsession with perfection might be sabotaging your success, and how embracing good enough could be the key to unlocking your true potential. I'm going to share something that might shock you. Some of the most successful people in the world are terrible perfectionists, not because they don't care about quality, but because they've learned something that most of us struggle to accept. Perfect is the enemy of progress, and sometimes good enough is actually better than perfect. Let's start with a story that illustrates this perfectly. In the 1980s, a small software company called Microsoft was competing against tech giants with unlimited resources. While their competitors spent years perfecting every line of code, Microsoft had a different philosophy. They released products that were good enough to solve real problems, then improved them based on actual user feedback. Their rivals. They were still in the lab, polishing features that users might never even want. This brings us to our first major insight about the perfectionist's paradox. Perfectionism creates an illusion of control while actually making us less effective. When we demand perfection from ourselves, we're essentially saying that we can predict exactly what the world needs before we've even tested our ideas in reality. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you delayed starting a project because you didn't have all the information you needed? Or avoided sharing your work because it wasn't polished enough? This is perfectionism disguised as preparation, and it's costing you more than you realize. The psychology behind perfectionism is fascinating and deeply rooted in our survival instincts. Our brains are wired to avoid failure because thousands of years ago, failure could mean death. But in today's world, this ancient programming is working against us. We've created a society where the fear of imperfection paralyzes us from taking the very actions that could lead to our success. Here's where things get interesting. Research shows that perfectionism actually decreases performance in most areas of life. When we set impossibly high standards, we create a mental environment where our brain is constantly stressed about potential failure. This stress literally impairs our cognitive function, making us less creative, less decisive, and ironically, more likely to make mistakes. But perfectionism isn't just about performance, it's about identity. Many perfectionists have learned to tie their self-worth to their achievements. They believe that if their work isn't perfect, then they themselves aren't worthy of love, respect, or success. This creates a vicious cycle where the fear of imperfection becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let me share another perspective that might change how you think about this. The concept of good enough doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means understanding the difference between standards that serve you and standards that enslave you. Good enough is about being strategic with your perfectionism, applying it where it truly matters while letting go where it doesn't. Consider the world of entrepreneurship. Successful entrepreneurs aren't necessarily the most talented or the most prepared. They're often the ones who are willing to launch before they feel ready, to iterate based on real feedback, rather than imagined scenarios. They understand that market validation is more valuable than theoretical perfection. This principle extends far beyond business. In relationships, good enough means being vulnerable and authentic rather than waiting until you feel like you have everything figured out. In creative pursuits, it means sharing your work while it still has room for improvement. In learning, it means asking questions even when they might make you look foolish. The perfectionist's paradox reveals itself most clearly when we examine opportunity cost. Every hour you spend perfecting something that's already functional is an hour you're not spending on the next important thing. While you're polishing draft number 15, someone else is already on their third project, learning and growing at a rate you simply can't match when you're stuck in perfectionist paralysis. But here's the twist that makes this even more counterintuitive. The pursuit of perfection often leads to worse outcomes than accepting good enough. When we're so focused on avoiding any possible criticism or failure, we tend to play it safe. We choose solutions that are technically flawless, but lack the boldness and originality that create real impact. Think about art for a moment. Some of the most beloved pieces in history have visible flaws, imperfections that make them human and relatable. The crack in Leonard Cohen's voice, the deliberately rough edges in a Banksy piece, the asymmetry in handmade pottery. These imperfections don't detract from the value. They often enhance it by making the work feel authentic and alive. This connects to a deeper truth about human psychology. We're drawn to imperfection because it's relatable. When someone shares their struggles, their failures, their works in progress, we connect with them more deeply than when they present a polished facade. Perfection creates distance. Imperfection creates connection. So how do we break free from the perfectionist trap? The first step is recognizing that perfectionism is often procrastination in disguise. When you find yourself endlessly tweaking and adjusting, ask yourself honestly whether you're improving the work or avoiding the vulnerability of sharing it with the world. The second step is redefining your relationship with failure. Instead of seeing mistakes as evidence of your inadequacy, start viewing them as data points that help you improve. Every imperfect attempt teaches you something that no amount of theoretical planning ever could. The third step is practicing what I call strategic imperfection. Choose specific areas where you'll deliberately accept good enough so you can focus your perfectionist energy where it truly matters. Maybe you'll spend extra time crafting the core message of your presentation while accepting that your slides don't need to be magazine-quality beautiful. Here's a practical framework you can use starting today. For any project or decision, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what's the minimum viable version that would still provide value? Second, what's the worst realistic outcome if this isn't perfect? Third, what opportunity am I missing by not moving forward now? Often, you'll discover that the worst realistic outcome of imperfect action is far better than the guaranteed outcome of perfect inaction. You'll also realize that most of your perfectionist standards exist only in your head. The world is much more forgiving of imperfection than you imagine. The perfectionist's paradox also reveals something important about timing. Perfect timing doesn't exist. There will always be something you could improve, some skill you could develop further, some detail you could refine. Waiting for perfect conditions is really waiting for an excuse to never begin. Some of the most successful people I know have a different relationship with perfection altogether. They view it as a direction rather than a destination. They're constantly improving, but they're not paralyzed by the gap between where they are and where they want to be. They understand that excellence is a journey, not a single moment of flawless execution. This mindset shift has practical implications for every area of your life. In your career, it means being willing to take on challenges even when you don't feel fully qualified. In your relationships, it means having difficult conversations, even when you haven't found the perfect words. In your personal growth, it means taking action on your insights, even when your understanding isn't complete. The truth is, good enough often leads to better than perfect because it gets you into the game. Once you're actively engaged, once you're getting real feedback and real experience, you can improve in ways that no amount of theoretical preparation could provide. You learn what actually matters versus what you thought mattered. As we wrap up, I want you to think about one area of your life where perfectionism is holding you back right now. Maybe it's a project you've been postponing, a conversation you've been avoiding, or a dream you've been preparing for without actually pursuing. What would change if you gave yourself permission to be good enough? Remember, the goal isn't to lower your standards across the board. It's to become more strategic about where you apply your highest standards and more accepting of imperfection everywhere else. It's about understanding that done is often better than perfect, and that good enough can be the foundation for something truly exceptional. The perfectionist's paradox teaches us that sometimes the best way to achieve excellence is to stop trying to be perfect. Start before you're ready. Share before it's polished. Act before you have all the answers. Your imperfect action today is infinitely more valuable than your perfect plan tomorrow. What will you start today that you've been perfecting forever? The world needs your good enough more than it needs your never-finished perfects. So if you like the video and want to learn more about the problems of the human mind, then let me know by subscribing. Bye-bye.